I'd like to welcome to the set for her first day of work, Kyliegh Curran. All right, head back to your one. Keeps you kind of straight, but starting you kind of drifting too fast. First cut.
Oh, that's there. Okay, good. Okay.
When do you want to start?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
All right, so what we're gonna do is run it from just as Robert lays him down. So you guys will come running in. Robert's gonna step on his arm like before. Jacob will give the line.
And B marker.
C marker.
You should go home.
Huh? You said you needed my help.
No, not you.
Oh, you talking to her? She's here now.
Everybody?
I can't tell.
Sleep harder.
Well, hi there.
You wanna let me go?
Oh, no, sweetie. No, I don't.
Take nourishment and endure.
Anyway, we need to eat. All of us. Hmm? Are the canisters low?
Oh, of course not.
Excuse me, sweetheart. You look relaxed. You feel relaxed, don't you, Abra?
I guess.
You should. Just relax. We're friends.
It makes sense. It makes sense. So we'll do the. We'll just take it from coming off this mark over to the glass. this set's amazing, isn't it? Just breathtaking. Every time I walk in here, I'm just floored. It's like walking into your own memories of the first time you really watch a movie that burrows into your head and stays there. You get to walk around in it. It's really something.
Action.
Pain purifies steam. Fear too, so you understand.
One, two, three, four. One. That's going to be better. Okay.
Just like that again, please.
Paperback, beat up paperback from the library when I was in 5th grade. I was way too young to read it, I think, but boy did I read it, and it completely changed the way I looked at the world. It terrified me in a way that I, in 5th grade, had never been scared, but also made me feel empowered. And it started this experience that I've had with so much of your work, where getting through the anxiety of being afraid while reading a story taught me, who was a very scared kid, how to be brave in short bursts, in short increments, and it became exercise of character for me to get through the books, and so I became a constant reader, and then struggled my way into somehow a career where people would pay for me to make movies, which is still crazy to me, and now I'm sitting here next to you, which is also completely surreal.
By taking Dan Torrance's story as a grown-up and filtering it through his own apparently large heart, Mike has been able to take the Kubrick movie, I think, a step further so that it warms things up. People are going to compare this to The Shining, and they're going to say, this is, going back and trying to reheat leftovers and all the rest of it, and that the sequel is just a blatant opportunity to try and ride on the coattails of a book that was a big success and blah, 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 and all the rest of it. So you have to cope with all that stuff and kind of put it out of your mind and say, this is what I'm doing. The story should stand on its own, as its own thing. And Mike's movie stands on its own, as its own thing. And it has its own excitement and its own rewards apart from all the stuff that it brings with it. But again, I think the stuff that it brings with it, it could have been baggage if somebody had done it that it wasn't good, but instead it's a dividend. It enriches. And I don't know about anybody else, how anybody's going to feel about it. But for me, it was great to go back to the Overlook. I would say that Rebecca, as Rose the Hat, is just an amazing, she's so beautiful and so evil, and she doesn't underplay, she doesn't overplay. It's like, hi there, she's great. How are you, handsome? She's wonderful, and it's a victory, too, for Mike's eye and the costume designer's eye that the hat is perfect. I had visualized a much higher hat, but what she wears is perfect. She is Rose the Hat.
One of the things that I believe very much about horror cinema in general is that your genre elements are only as strong as your characters. And that's something that I learned reading Stephen King for a lifetime. And one of the most rewarding aspects of kind of any movie is watching a character come to life. For something like this, these were characters that appeared in a certain way in your head when you worked on the novel. And you communicate them so beautifully on the page that I feel like they were very similarly represented in my imagination reading the novel. Rose the Hat, when I put the novel down, and I read it the weekend that it was released, I thought she was one of the most exciting and charismatic and fascinating antagonists that I'd read in a very long time. And I was so excited to see Rebecca bring that to life.
One of the things that works in this movie is that we see people that we can relate to as human beings, people who are friends, people who are caregivers, people who are protectors. And that's to a large extent what makes the scary parts scary.
When you use the words just horror, I always kick at that a little bit because I think horror in general is, I love what you said about it being just one string on the guitar. It's what makes it cathartic, I think, is that it's a reflection, it's a reflective surface into which we can kind of safely examine the darker sides of the human experience. And you never would recognize darkness without light, for something to just be horror. I don't really understand. And one of the things I think that defines a Stephen King novel, and I hope defines the kind of movies that I'm interested in making, is that they're movies about being a human being, and they're movies about love and friendship and loss and some of the deepest fears that we have as humans on this giant rock floating in space, but that they're ultimately meant to show us in equal measure the darkest it can be out there and kind of the apex of our positive potential as well. And I think that's why people gravitate so strongly to works like The Stand that are so clearly about human beings and how we fall into either of those categories often at the same time.
Dr. Sleep novel, and our script seems to be very much about, recovery, the child having gone through this terrible experience. How does he carry on, and how does he deal with his shine? How does he deal with the fact that he's different, and he deals with it by drinking like his father did, to the point where he can't do that anymore, and he's as his father did. His father got sober, I believe, 5-6 months before he took the job at the Overlook Hotel. But our Dan gets sober and and then is led back to the Overlook Hotel eventually. He's working in an old folks in a hospice, in fact, an old folks hospice, and he finds, although he's done this before in our story, we discover that he's rather helpful to people as they pass away, and so he sits with the people who are dying and helps them cross over, if you like, because that's where he talks to them about it being like falling asleep, and it's like a wonderful sleep, and so he gets the nickname Dr. Sleep. She reaches out to Dan. She doesn't know him, and he doesn't know her, but she also has the shine. She also has the psychic ability, and she projects into his world. She's looking for help. He hears her. Because he hears her, she when she really needs his help, she finds him and comes to him. At first, he turns her away, and because his whole philosophy early on in the story is not to use the shine, he's drunk to sort of suppress it all these years, to suppress the horrible visitations that he gets in his mind and the hallucinations he gets with people visiting him from the Overlook Hotel, ghosts and spirits that are trapped there. And he's developed a way through the help of Dick Halloran of trapping them and keeping them locked away inside him. And so he's all about not using the shine, not using his abilities, trying to keep it all just on the down low. And so when Abra comes to him, he suggests that she just, go home and leave things alone. Don't pry into things that that aren't your business, and don't shine. And it's really through his relationship with her that she opens that up in him, and he realizes that's an important part of who he is. It's the worst place in the world for people who have the shine, and he knows that he has the shine, and he knows that Abra has it more than him, and he knows that Rose the Hat has it more than both of them. So if she is the most powerful person or thing with the shine, then this is the best place to take her to try and kill her, because it will be deadly for her to be in that space. We're doing an adaptation of Stephen King's novel Dr. Sleep, and that's as good an idea as any. It's an original story that he's written, and it's therefore an original movie. Of course, there's a lot of thought and attention being paid to pleasing people that love that movie and people that love that book. I really like working with her. She's lovely. She's so bubbly and full of beans and the joys. And then when Mike says, stand by, she just like snaps into Abra, and you just watch her change.
Abra is one of the leads in our film. She is Dan's niece. She possesses the Shining, and she's the one who helps Dan take down the True Knot. The Shining is a supernatural ability. It's like telekinesis, it's being psychic. You see, like, visions, and you can move things with your mind. You can read people's thoughts, and you can send your thoughts to another person. Dr. Sleep clears up a lot of questions and gaps in The Shining. When we follow Dan and Abra, it really answers what happened to Danny and what happened to his family and everything. And the connection with Abra and Dan really compel you to see the movie, I think. Mike works amazing with child actors. To help me prepare, he called me and Ewan in for a director's meeting, and he told us about his vision for Abra, Dan, and initially Dr. Sleep. Ewan is awesome to work with. He's super nice, he's really sweet, he's fun-loving, but he's also super professional. Before we start filming, he'll help me run my lines. And my job is to be there for Ewan, and his is to be there for me. And we're a good team, I think. Rebecca's amazingly funny, but also right when we get to the scene, she's extremely focused. She helps me focus, definitely, when I'm going all crazy. And she's perfect at being evil. I think it's a real coming of age for Abra. She's a bit more naive and vulnerable at the beginning, and then towards the end, she really understands what can happen in the world and reality and things like that. I love horror. I am a total horror fan. I don't think it's really about being scared. I think it's really just the dark aspect, since I'm so used to my childlike life. I like being in dark
Rose
reality.
is the leader of a nomadic group, a tribe. And I think a lot of people look at I've read the book and followed the book, and I think it's wonderful that we've been quite close to the book with this film. And little hints are made here and there. And that's basically how I, together with the director, create a character. I don't like describing it as magic. I think magic is a simple term. It's extraordinary, an extraordinary gift, and it shows itself in different ways. The younger they are, the stronger this power is. And my character, Rose, together with the True Knot, my gang, feed on their shine. The power, once going into a meditative state for Rose, she floats into the mind to seek and find the shine, basically. And Abra happens to sit on the most incredible source of power that she has ever met before, probably equal to her own. And I think when we meet something that is so threatening, it becomes a challenge and something you want to win over. And the question that is actually asked by Crow, do we turn her or do we kill her? The realization that we obviously don't have to do neither one of them, because if we turn her, I will have someone equally as powerful as myself in the group, and that is not a good thing. And killing her off straight away is just not sufficient enough. It doesn't give enough. Kyliegh has this incredible strength of gaining power. I remember a scene we did. We have just this standoff on the street, and she's supposed to walk straight through my character and be a little bit cocky. And I thought, child actor, let's see what you can bring. And she met me with such power that I went up to the director afterwards and I said, I kind of want to do it again because I feel completely lost of all power. I have no power left. I felt really silly in this scene. And he said, good, then we got it. And I thought, well done. She made me feel very belittled. I think it's a great choice for them to put Ewan in this role because he is so bloody versatile in his acting. He has that little shimmer in his eye. He's fun. He's quirky. He's a weirdo, and yet he has such depth and darkness in him, which is needed for this character. True knot is what's tied can never be untied. So it's a knot, basically. And if you are turned and give your devotion to us, it's kind of like the Musketeers, isn't it? All for one and one for all mentality. And also, once you're turned, this is it. This is what you'll have forever. Live well, live long, eat well, stay young, basically. I want to be Mike's muse. I want to work with him again and again and again. And I know we shouldn't, and it's silly because we need to move on. And I am actually so lucky with the directors I've worked with. Mike has a book. Mike introduced me to this book, which is basically all of his shots. He's that bloody prepared that he knows the angles, he knows the shots, he knows what he needs for editorial purpose. Now, this might scare some people and actors because you think, well, then what am I doing here? Where is my creative aspect in it? That has nothing to do with it. He showed me this book and said, you can look at it or not, don't worry. On set, I will ask him what he needs from the scene, and then we just play. So not only does he have his editorial cap on, we have the producer, we have director Mike, but he also has the openness to let us create and create something together for the character.
He's a crucial character in terms of he's kind of a friend for Dan and somebody they can trust, and they bond. They recognize each other as kind of soul brothers that they have this kind of brotherly respect for each other, and what Billy is doing for Dan others have done for him, and so he sees it as a kind of way of paying forward, and that sets up a future narrative for them as friends, so that when things start to turn crazy with the introduction of this whole supernatural world of which Billy's not aware of or conscious of, Dan's got a friend that he can turn to for support and help, and that's Billy. In this movie, he's kind of making 3 movies. I feel like there's Dan's The A story, which ties directly to Abra, and then the True Knot. So there's 3 different tones, these 3 different worlds as they intersect and collide. So he's happily, deeply plans out every aspect, every beat, every element, all his shots, you know, very impressive, very, very impressive director. This is my first time to work with Ewan, and of course he's a great actor. He's done a really impressive body of work, very diverse. He very, very, very comfortable from big budget franchise stuff and right into comedy and drama and now, you know, this sort of dalliance into horror. He's very at ease in whatever medium, I think, or genre. So it's great to work with him. He's a very playful guy, very fun, very, very kind, which is nice. You know, it's always good to get that experience. It'll be interesting to try and find an angle on Billy which would sort of challenge the notion of what a good, trustworthy guy looks like. You know, cornrows, but he's got to have a sense of history as well. He's seen some harder times, and he's been in recovery. And so I came up with this whole thing, this idea that perhaps if the first instance of when you first see Billy, he might not be your first choice to like leave your kids with, right? He might challenge that notion of what a good guy looks like. When Danny's character first sees him, you know, working with kids in the middle of town in the park's like, okay, I'm not sure about this guy. And so you have to earn that relationship with Billy. Once in a while you get this feeling this is going to be a good one. The core audience who wants this movie is going to really enjoy it. And it takes such a load off. It's such a relief, you know, you don't have to waste all this energy wondering, oh God, I wonder if this is going to work. You know, I feel really confident that we're making a really good movie, and it's a movie that a lot of people are really going to enjoy. So it just makes my job so much more enjoyable.
You're not always looking for a kind of a psychic nourishment, food basically, which we call steam. And Crow Daddy is basically the guy who goes out to hunt those kids down that have the steam, the special steam, or the shining. We come across a whale, a very powerful girl that has a lot of steam and that could sustain the True Knot for a long, long time. And so that becomes our mission, is to find her. But little do we realize how powerful this little girl is and how much we have to fight up against to capture her. You know, you could do the cliche monster kind of devilish, evil character, but there's a lot more to these characters. They have more dimensions to them. And I thought Crow Daddy, the main thing that stuck out for me was just the love that he had for Rose. And you know, I get to play a lot of bad guys, and it's nice to have these different layers to these characters, and Mike's very good at that. I wanted to be involved because, you know, number one, it was Stephen King. I'm just a big fan of Stephen King, and I was a huge fan of The Shining. I think it sticks a lot to the book, and obviously it goes off into its own way. It's a film. It has its own characteristics as well. I just personally am such a big fan of Stephen King, and I would do anything to be a part of anything that he wrote.
Andy is definitely one of the most interesting characters I've ever been able to portray. Just because she's coming from a very low place in her life. She's very innocent in a way, even though she is strong. Abra is, I think that she's she's definitely the heart of the story. She's a very important character because she sort of connects with Danny when he's in the lowest place of his life, and has decided he wants to basically, when he was younger and he was going through this horrible time, sort of when Dick died. So he doesn't have anyone to sort of talk about this power that he has anymore. So he decides to sort of turn it off, and we learn that in the beginning of the movie. So when Abra comes in, she is able to, she's the only one who's able to sort of get him out of his shell and basically forces him to accept his power, which is just so important. I trust him so much, and I feel like if I was doing anything wrong or off the character, then he would, step right in. But he also lets us have a lot of freedom to sort of play with how we feel these characters would be. And I appreciate that so much. He's such a great guy. So when you first meet her, there's this sort of energy that's constantly surrounding her, and it's very special, and I've never met anyone like her. It's kind of like you're having a conversation with her, and it's like you and her are the only people in the room. And, on set, hundreds of people are running around. But as soon as you lock eyes with her, it's just this, like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like this whole new type of thing. And it's almost like powerful, it's very powerful. And so after meeting Rebecca, I understood why Mike decided to cast her as Rose, because I knew Rose had to be this, like, out of this world, crazy, psychic, powerful character. And Rebecca, she is
The bulk of the events of the book and of our story take place, when Danny's, in his 40s and still wrestling with the demons of his father, still wrestling with alcoholism, still struggling to kind of carve out a life for himself that is not in his father's shadow. So the spine of Dr. Sleep is it's Danny Torrance's story. But there are two other meaningful stories that converge with his over the course of the novel and over the course of the movie. The first is Abra Stone, who's kind of the spark that lights the powder keg in this instance. And she's a 13-year-old girl who has grown up with powers she doesn't entirely understand and that her parents don't entirely understand. And she's wrestling with, is she alone in the world? Is she the only one who feels this way or who can see or do these things? And reaches out psychically and finds a kindred spirit in Danny Torrance. And then the third story is our villain, Rose the Hat, and her band, the True Knot, which is really remarkable as a villain. She's the leader of, essentially, to call them a cult implies that you don't like them, which you kind of do. The True Knot were all once human. I think that's an important facet of their being. And by introduction of steam, which is essentially the condensation of psychic abilities of others, that's their food, and that's also the way that they become something other than human. And they're essentially something that by feeding from the steam and propagating, they retain their human form, but there's something much more insidious beneath. The True Knot, or this band of the True Knot, has been around a long time, and they use their psychic abilities to locate and to capture prey, in this case, children who shine. And they are a bit under duress because they're not finding children as easily as they used to. And so it makes them take more and more risks from their normal MO of blending in order to find food and sustain themselves and live. And the personification of that holy grail of food is Abra Stone, who is by far the most powerful child that the True Knot has ever found. And once Rose is aware of her existence, Abra is a must-have for them. Abra's the glue that holds these three stories together in that she senses the True Knot preying on a child. And in the meantime, she's reached out to seek out others like herself, and she's found Dan Torrance. And initially, Dan didn't want to have anything to do with her because he's living his quiet life. He's working the steps of AA. He's really sort of found a place for himself away from the demons of his past. And initially, he feels anyway that he shouldn't step back in. But Abra's effervescence and, in a sense, her energy and her recklessness even causes Rose the Hat to notice her, and that's what compels Danny to protect Abra, and that's how they come together. Ewan McGregor has done a lot of types of movies in his career, and successfully so, but he hasn't done a lot of supernatural thriller or horror, and I think bringing him to that audience is a fascinating opportunity that was too good to pass up. But I also think one of the reasons Ewan is Ewan is because he does such deep dives into his characters. And that was what we needed for Danny Torrance, and he threw himself into it wholeheartedly, and we couldn't be any more thrilled with the result. There are, a lot of Easter eggs in the movie. Much of the palette and much of the lighting and camera and DI choices we made harken back to The Shining. And, people can have fun looking for that stuff. I certainly did. But you can also, it's its own thing, because, as we weave each of these stories together in Dr. Sleep, we need, each needs to have its own look and feel, but they need to come together cohesively. So you definitely will find, things from the book or things from the movie or things from, Mike's other work, including actors, but including some other things. And I hope there are plenty of layers for people to sink their teeth into. A lot of people say they have the movie in their head. Mike has the movie in his head. It's, it manifests itself in several ways. He does come from an editorial background, and, he knows how he wants to cut things. Our script was 140 pages, and but we had a shot list that was much longer than that because each scene is meticulously mapped out based on what Mike wants from the scene. When you're working with a confident filmmaker like Mike who can see the movie as clearly as he can, it's easy to roll with the punches. It's also easy to plan something that's distinct and interesting and communicate those interesting choices to the crew who have to help execute it in advance.
Shine is a thing that is consistent in Dr. Sleep as well as in The Shining, and it's a power that people can have. Ewan McGregor, who plays our adult Dan Torrance, says in our movie that everybody has a little bit of the shines. It can be as simple as knowing that your wife needs flowers when you're coming home, or walking into a room and feeling somebody is in emotional distress without even having to talk to them. Dan Torrance, as a little boy and also as an adult, he has an acute power, which is to somewhere between telekinesis and clairvoyance. He can not only read people's minds, but he can also see where they've been. He can communicate telepathically, and he can feel presence around him. King, a master himself, describes the True Knot as a virus. And it's a virus that's traveling through the circulatory system of the United States. And the highways and byways of the United States are the capillary system, or the veins of the U.S. And these people travel by caravan, by RV, and they're sort of almost invisible because they just look like anybody sort of out for a weekend camp. But they're much more than that. And the True Knot, led by Rose the Hat, our incredible Rebecca Ferguson, the True Knot are this ancient group of devils. They eat souls. They eat pain. They find children with the shine, and they kill them and consume their souls, their shine. He's the person who's consistent from The Shining, both novel and movie, and Dr. Sleep. And so we needed somebody who is an extraordinary actor, who had in him a darkness or could portray a darkness, but also who is incredibly sympathetic. Because, you know, the Dan Torrance that we meet in the book and in the movie, Dr. Sleep, is in a dark place. And he's in the darkest place he's ever been. And he's doing really awful things to himself, but residually, sort of there are people. There's fallout for the people around him. So we did not want to lose people watching the film and have them not like our lead. And so we got the best and most incredible actor out there, Ewan McGregor, who is also so sympathetic, and we've seen him in all of his work, whether he's playing the most likable person or someone who's done unlikable things, he's still a likable character, and he portrays Dan Torrance impeccably. He plays upon our primal fears, you know, the sort of that reptilian part of our brain, the things that just sort of he instinctively understands, makes us uneasy, he preys upon them. So whether that's, you know, humiliation by one's peers as a teenager, which is present in a lot of his work, whether that's finding something, a dead body in the woods, whether that's what is actually, you know, underneath us, underfoot, you know, in the sewer system of our town, what kind of evil lurks therein, whether that's just what plays in our imagination as we're in bed and we're thinking, is that someone by the window? Is that billowing curtain? Is there something there? It's just these, and also, of course, in Dr. Sleep, it's our fear of kidnappers, of people who prey upon children. So it's all of those things and more, but clearly he's able to tap into our, right into our brains. Maybe he has a bit of the shine in him. In the Overlook, all of these ghosts that populated the hotel and expired in the hotel, the twins, Mrs. Massey, Delvin, all of these ghosts come back and they haunt us once again, and ultimately Dan Torrance releases them at just the right moment. He's actually, what he's done is he's baited Rose the Hat. She thinks that she's baited him, and she's beaten him, and she's going to eat his shine. But in fact, he drew her into the hotel, drew her to the center of the hotel, to the heart of it, to open all these lockboxes in his head, and to let all these ghosts out, all these hungry, hungry ghosts, to come out and devour her. And so I asked him, because I was the executive on Dr. Sleep, I asked him, do you know this book, Dr. Sleep? And he said to me, I do. I've read it. And you have an issue there. You've got to synthesize The Shining, the novel, The Shining, the movie, and Dr. Sleep, the book. You've got to figure out a way to thread the three together. I said, you're exactly right. We do have to figure that out. Do you have any idea how you would do that? And he said, do I? I've been thinking about that for quite some time. And he pitched me the idea of relocating the final act, the action, to an Overlook Hotel, still in existence Overlook, although it's been, you know, age-worn and what have you, but it's still standing. And to have Danny, the ghosts that Danny's been battling, be the ultimate heroes, in a way, to the story, because they're what he uses to defeat Rose the Hat. And when he pitched me that, I looked at him and I said, that's incredible. I love that. I'd like to do that. Do you think that you could convince Stephen King to do that? And he looked at me and he said, I don't know, I'll try to write it and we'll see. With Dan's life, you know, Dick Halloran says to him, cause a wheel. And I think he understands at a certain point that there's a circularity, that he knows Abra Stone is very much like him. I mean, she has potentially even more shine power than he does. Dick Halloran says to Dan, had those creatures been made aware of you, they would have come after you and they would have consumed you. So Dick, as Dan's protector and as Dan's mentor, says to him, it's your time. I'm not going to return again. This is my last time here, and you know, pay it forward, essentially. and help this little girl. And he realizes, of course, that the little girl is so powerful in the shine that they're going to come for her no matter what. Let's start with his writing. He's an extraordinary writer. I mean, he really is. He's just a top writer. He's able to execute exactly what he has in his head on the page from the get-go. And he writes incredibly compelling scripts, stories, but as well, they're incredibly compelling characters that he writes. And King, who's a master and writes with such a fantastic, electrifying, exciting tonality, Mike was able to transfer King's magic to the page. So that's first and foremost. But then as a director, he's just, he's so experienced and so capable. Knowing all of that, and knowing how much and this is key, this is important, how much he reveres The Shining, the movie, and acknowledges and understands that Stanley Kubrick is a master, and that's a masterpiece of a film. And he reveres and admires and emulates Stephen King. So he holds both of these giants, Kubrick and King, in equal regard and holds them up both in a reverential way. And he wanted to do something that would honor both of them, but also tell a unique narrative and a unique story, which was Mike Flanagan's interpretation of Dr. Sleep, threading the middle. So for Rose the Hat, we needed someone who had the things that Rebecca effortlessly brings, or seemingly effortlessly brings to screen, which is she's beautiful and seductive and beguiling, but that is exactly her intention. That is a power that she uses to pull you in closer. And when you really discover who Rose the Hat is, she's pernicious and dangerous and venal and wants to kill you, wants to expire you. So Rebecca has this sort of wonderful combination of this effortless sort of transcendent beauty and lightness, but she also really brings it when Rose the Hat...
FuturePreviews.com. Whoa! Go behind the scenes of movies. Subscribe to Future Flicks YouTube channel.